a lot of messing around, like, and it's interesting. You mentioned at the beginning talking about the year in Ireland. We had an election which actually more or less threw up the same result as the election which happened just before the COVID episode started in February 2020. It's almost exactly, the numbers are exactly the same, except the Green Party is now kaput and has been replaced by a different party which is identical, the Social Democrats, and they'll probably end up in government, or the Labour Party, which again is identical, uh, will end up in government as the tail to wag the dog of the larger parties, because now it takes three parties. It used to take just two, and before that, actually, one party could govern. So there's a kind of a deterioration, but the extent that we have, you can't disallow the possibility that there has been massive fraud, because I mean the Democratic Party of the United States is very much present in Ireland, and they're the world experts in fraud, electoral fraud. So you kind of have to assume there's a bit of that going on. And there was in the European elections where there was migrants were being bussed in all over the place to vote in elections over the local elections. And of course, they were having the odd vote in the European elections as well, even though they're not supposed to, and so on. But okay, parking the question of fraud. And I mean, I say to people, well, if you want to know was there fraud, just ask yourself, look at your local politician and the way he looks at you and the way he speaks to you compared to the way he spoke to you 10 years ago. Does he care whether you vote for him or not? I think not. So he knows something you don't know, okay? So that's the way to think about fraud. But even leaving that aside, if there wasn't fraud, then there was complete, like, stupidity. But on the other hand, you see the whole pseudo-reality is constructed in such a way that no real viable alternative can find its way into the system to create an opposition that would be in any sense meaningful. It doesn't matter who's elected. It doesn't matter what the government's composition is. It will be the same outcome. We've had the same government now for something like 13, 14 years, essentially. Even though they've been booted out numerous times, they still came back in a different form. And that happens everywhere now. It happens in France. I mean, you've had that creep president of France forever, and he'll be, there for another forever by the looks of it. And it's the same everywhere. Now, Britain, of course, a different case, but Britain just gets worse and worse. Like, you got to say that there's great creativity at the heart of the British political system.
Yeah. I mean, after Rishi Sunak, I think a lot of people thought it couldn't get any worse. But
yeah,
it's
and
happened.
then it just did, and it's amazing. Like that, you think, well, okay, well, what's going to be next? My God, you could worse than this. Like, wow, that would be some achievement. You kind of almost look forward to seeing, what kind. It's like a soap opera. It's horrible. It's really
What will they
awful.
come up with in the sequel?
Yeah. So, I like politics. I mean, you see, there's a bit of a I'm not sure how to express this or how to think it through. There's a big, strong view within the movement, the freedom movement, that politics is dead and it shouldn't be entertained. And, if you run for election, you're kind of playing their game and so on. And I kind of understand that to some extent. But I didn't say, well, yeah, but isn't the problem here that does an opposition get into a position where they can do something? Well, there are three ways, I say, and they all begin with V. There's a violent insurrection, Velvet Revolution, as in Czechoslovakia in 1989, and voting. Now, if you say voting doesn't work, and I'm not going to disagree because, it doesn't seem to at the moment anyway, but I would have thought, by the way, that eventually, if we win, it will be, one of the part of that will be winning an election of some kind. But, at some point, at some stage. But if you're saying, no, that's completely useless, okay, which of the other two options are you now proposing? And how do you say we should go about it? And nobody has any answers to that at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's to do with something I was saying with Greg earlier, is that it's the type of people who are involved in something dictate what will happen in that thing. And that's a banal statement, but it needs to be stated. And people like you and me are probably not the types who will seize political power.
No. No,
whatever. We're not that type of person. But so it needs that changeover, as well, not changeover. Let's not do ourselves down. It needs that injection of those types of people,
it does. Yeah,
organizers, doers, etc.
that's
Um,
right.
yeah,
People who and people with pretty high boredom thresholds. I mean, who don't get distracted into other things. Uh, like I have this sense that it probably is true in every country that when these traumas descend on a population, that it takes a very long time for the kind of people who might be suitable to even approach the political sphere. And I think for that reason that in Ireland and maybe elsewhere, the future leaders are nowhere near that yet. They're still out there, unrecognizable. You see them in the street, you pass them in the street, but they haven't declared themselves yet. There won't be the people who, were at the front line by and large. That doesn't seem to work very well, for very long. Uh, I don't know why that is. Uh, but there's also problems, I think, with the resistance movement in lots of different other ways, and certainly in Ireland, whereby there's a lot of infighting, a lot of kind of lack of cooperation. In the context of, say, vote transfers, we have a proportional representation system, and it would be, quite easy to manage votes in a better way, and it's not happening, and a lot of kind of backstabbing and so on, and I think somehow that bespeaks a kind of frustration at how successful actually the campaign of the regime has been in wearing down the opposition and demonizing the opposition and making them pretty much impotent and marginal. And so you're kind of waiting for a moment that never seems to get any nearer. And that is the awakening, the consciousness exploding into realization. And we're nowhere near. I don't know if we're any nearer to that than we were in May of 2020. To be honest with you, that's again a bit negative, maybe, but that's how I see it sometimes. That
okay.
to some extent, the kind of relative primitiveness of the world was protecting the human race from the kind of things we're suffering now. It's a little bit like, Ireland kind of, when I was growing up, Ireland was a very poor place, but actually a great fun place to live, and a very nice place to live, even though the media worked very hard to demonize the past. And and in a sense that the greatest disaster that happened to us when we was becoming rich, of course it's entirely false, the richness. It's a multinational corporation economy functioning, cuckoo in the nest economy, using Ireland as its base and turning the entire island into an entirely different place to suit themselves. But we get nostalgic. I get nostalgic then for a time when nobody wanted to come here, when nobody wanted to know anything. It was a really boring, stupid place, and I mean, I remember we used to get really upset when a famous rock band would have a world tour and they wouldn't come to Dublin. We'd be really outraged. But now we really want them not to come to Dublin. We really wish you stay away, don't come. Go. We want the corporations to come. There's this guy Lutnick who's taken over. He's President Trump's new Commerce Secretary, and he's been threatening to pull the plug on the Irish transnational tax dodging economy. And I really hope, and not some. I tweeted out about it recently. Let's hope he's not bluffing. And I got a huge positive response. Like huge numbers of people out there think the same thing. They think the only hope Ireland now has is if it is completely destroyed economically. That's the only thing that will save it from absolute obliteration.
Yeah, yeah. It's a fairly common syndrome where wealth is a curse,
Hmm.
where for a country, that it ends up. You pray for the old days. You pray for the simplicity of when we weren't that rich, when things were more innocent and less
Yeah,
corrupted and less commercial and less meaningless.
yeah,
Uh, you know,
and you weren't attracting envious glances or from outside. You're saying, "Oh, we'd like a bit of that." We could do that. We could use that place. We could dupe those people easily. We could steal their country from under them. They didn't think of that, but they didn't bother, and so we just sort of muddled along in our own way, and it was fine. We were absolutely fine. You know, nobody was dying of starvation. We weren't rich. We had old cars and stuff. But we were happy.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Scotland was similar. Uh, I often get nostalgic when I look at photos of Edinburgh in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and I realize, bloody hell, it really has changed.
Yeah.
As a whole thing, Edinburgh in the 80s had, patches of wasteland, waste ground where something had been, but there wasn't now. Whereas nowadays, it's all, building everywhere.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I don't like it. I preferred the dilapidation. There's something about me that I just preferred. It's got so much more character and personality, and it feels like a place, a home,
Yeah.
rather than just an outlet of
All those
globalism.
buildings that we used to love, which we love, we didn't realize we loved them, but we passed them and they were just there, and we just like. And now they're demolishing them and building these mass ugly tower blocks,
Yeah, yeah.
and for what?
Glasses.
Like, for people who are, for what? Like, well, to build an entirely different country on the site of the old one.
Yes, yes. That is ultimately what it amounts to.
That's
Um,
right. Or its logic. So I do believe that. See, we're back to this question then as well. Can Trump be taken at face value? Can he be taken at his word? I believe so, because the man is now 76 years of age. Like, if he's not going to do the right thing now, he's never going to do it. But why not? Like, I think that this is a real danger, that we're painting ourselves into a corner of believing that nothing is possible, that not much is possible anymore, that the world is too tightly bound in the grids, the power, the control grids, and so on. I don't believe that. I believe it's a question of our capacity to hope. And the problem is that that idea itself kills hope. So I think we should abandon that idea, even if in the abandonment of it, we are being, as it were, naive and a little bit sort of gawky and stupid. I say let's be that. Let's be naive, and let's pretend we can take our countries and our world back from these bastards. And then, there's a better chance of doing it in that frame of mind than in the other one.
yes, yes. I completely agree. I completely agree.